And so we are enlivening the resonance of remembering, activating all that is already alive inside, the intelligence that is already alive inside. We're activating the resonance of remembrance so that we stop seeking in the external world for any kind of fulfillment or freedom, love or wholeness. And we start really receiving the grace of the resources that we have already, that we're fully equipped. We have everything that is needed to remember. The great, glorious good news is that wholeness is already whole. The victory is already won. There never has been anything other. Anything other is just the mind's meanderings. And the invitation is to access the intelligence that remembers that the mind's meanderings and beliefs are not the truth. That the truth is the wholeness of perfect love, the wholeness that is the glory of God. That there is no love without God, no God without love. That it's all the same. It's an all-encompassing glory. And you are that. This truth is living itself right here, right now. And the invitation of satsang is to gather in the resonance of this truth that is living itself right now. In the resonance of the glory of perfect love that is right here, utterly whole and pure, right now. It's not about doing something. It's not about working upon yourself. It's not about imagining that some kind of salvation is in the future. It's about the remembrance. And it is also about in the presence of your own being here now, remembering that you have the absolute full intelligence in order to be yourself, and that you do not need anything outside of yourself. That such a huge part of the delusion has been born out of a great misunderstanding and belief in separation and division. And out of that, huge power imbalance, enormo. In truth, we are not touched by any kind of imaginings of imbalance. And so it is like a reorganizing, rebalancing of our internal functioning so that we are listening to the intelligence, listening as in receiving the grace of the flow of intelligence of our own nervous system, our own consciousness that knows what is, knows this truth. And that we stop moving in the programmed patterns of deficiency and delusion, attempting to find any kind of fulfillment in the external. Because the external world is a reflection of the mind, and the mind is, we could say it's a patterning, a limited patterning. It's not true. It's not the truth. And you know this. And that's why you are looking for the truth. The truth is inside you. My job is just to activate your remembrance and to be the living message. Have nothing else for you. I do not need you to be anything for me. I do not need you to be anything for anyone. The invitation is all about your own autonomy and remembering that you are the power. You are the intelligence, and you are absolutely one with all that is. We are one. There is only one, and that one is love, is the glory of God. The play here is to activate the resonance of remembrance, to be this living message, and to hold, by modeling naturally this truth, until that remembrance is so brilliant and radiant in you. And how that happens is by inviting an illumination of all of the patterns that are discordant, that are dancing in conditioned flows of seeming limitation. That in a way our work together is to illuminate and untangle, so that the frequency of remembrance at the point of view is so wildly alive with truth, an unquestionable knowing that you are the living of life, and you see through any sense of separation or division. You see that we are one, that there is only one, and that one is love. It is the supreme. It is divinity. It is purity. It is the extraordinary ordinariness of wholeness, whole. It is really about seeing yourself from the perspective of wholeness instead of seeing yourself from the perspective of lack. So the invitation here is to invite you to keep coming to the perspective of wholeness, to see yourself clearly from the perspective of wholeness, so that you can resonate in the remembrance of who you are and feel the aliveness of the power of the intelligence that you are, and that you are absolutely a wildly alive resonance of pure potentiality that has infinite possibilities for life to live itself out in the most extraordinary ways that cannot be imagined by the mind that is a pattern of limitation. This intelligence is a flow of light. Intelligence is flowing as consciousness, the light in consciousness flowing to unravel the patternings and the plays of consciousness, so that this remembrance can come so alive. There has never been a more potent time within the play of time for this remembrance to happen. And it has never been more important that you remember. Never been more important. There is not time to waste. There is not time to waste. It is about being the timeless, recognizing the spark of infinity, divinity, wholeness inside, and being this glorious being until your bones are shining with the clarity and light of remembrance. Yes, it is possible for your bones to shine with the light of remembrance, because every single cell and fiber of your being can be illuminated, rejuvenated, and healed in truth by this remembrance that you are not the body, you are not a vehicle of decay. You are the radiant light, eternal and free. So as these words come, it is not about understanding. It is about feeling the resonance of aliveness, where recognition starts to attune to a sense of remembrance. It's not that, in truth, there is a forgetting. Wholeness is whole. Truth is absolutely, unquestionably true right now, living itself. It's just that if you imagine that you have forgotten, let us illuminate the imagining and reveal the truth of what is here, of who you are. You are not a work in progress. You are not a problem to be fixed. You are the wild aliveness of life that just is the glory, the power, and the celebration of itself. Patterns of conditioning, patterns of limitation, the patternings in consciousness are patternings of discordance, where we have taken on programs and conditioned ourselves to live according to limited programs. But this is not the truth of who we are. It never has been. We have to free ourselves from all of the ways that we have believed that limitation is all that we can hope for, and then we die and do it all again. This is not so. It is not so. We have this incredible opportunity of a human life. And this human life holds this possibility of remembrance, of using the human beingness to remember. That within the human realm, there is the capacity, because this human realm is in appearance created out of all of the flows of intelligence. It's comprehensive, complete. And so it has the absolute possibility of complete remembrance, right? We could say that consciousness is programmed to remember. It has an evolutionary, natural impulse to remember its divinity. And you are made of that intelligence, that consciousness. You're not the person you have imagined yourself to be. The person is limitation. The consciousness is the flow that is leading to the remembrance of the complete unlimited freedom. Consciousness in its purity is unlimited as a flow, but it is also just the means to come to the remembrance of the great, glorious, perfect love that is, that just is. In the silence, in the stillness, is the deep remembrance of the true essence nature, the spark of divinity, infinity, the remembrance of who you are in truth, that you have never completely forgotten. The idea of forgetting, the idea of not being whole and of needing something external is just part of the program of the human condition. And the invitation here is to see through the program of the human condition and stop believing that program. Because as long as you believe that program, you will function within the limitation of your beliefs. You will function within the limitation of the conditions you have accepted as reality. But this is not the truth. It's not the whole truth. And the invitation is to open to a resonance of remembrance, a willingness, a courage to adventure beyond the boundaries into the extraordinary wilderness of your own consciousness. To leave yourself as a person in order to find yourself in the light of wholeness, in order to remember the light that you are, to come back to the source of pure consciousness and refine as consciousness into the remembrance of the source of consciousness and the divine light and radiant shining wholeness that you are in truth. This is the mission, we could say, of a human life. And either you recognize it or you don't. And it doesn't matter, because at some point you will, right? So you are here because you are dreaming of this truth. You're open to this truth. You can feel it. And that creates this appearance where you can hear yourself at a finer frequency, reminding yourself, enlivening the fine frequency of remembrance, enlivening the fine frequency of perfect love. That is the wholeness, openness, and vast, wide spaciousness of the one heart that just is. That love just is. Love just loves. Part of the program of the human condition is that we have learned that we need some kind of external. And we have learned to give power to whatever we imagine will give us what we need. In this moment, in the stillness, in the silence, let us just feel that movement of giving power away and pull it right in. Let us cancel out all of the coding, programming, and conditioning that tells us that we have to give power to some kind of seeming authority, albeit that we create in our own imagining what that authority is that we will give power to. Let us delete the code that allows us to give power to something other than the truth of who we are. Let us delete the code right now in the silence. Let us pull back all of those tendrils of imagining that someone else will give us what we need, so that we are not fully responsible for our own unfolding. We cannot find this truth where there is a sense of dependence, a sense of imagining that this truth is outside of us. We have to come to the remembrance that the intelligence is within the stillness, the silence of this moment. Your own presence is the aliveness of the power of the flow of life that is flowing within itself as a flow of consciousness to remember itself. Now it is perfect that we receive the resonance of this remembrance in companionship, but that we do not imagine that we are divided, less than, right? You are not ever less than whole. You are never less than anyone. There are no enlightened beings that are higher or better than you. Nonsense, absolute nonsense, right? Delete that coding that imagines. You recognize a resonance of wholeness because you are that intelligence of wholeness. We have to find all of the subtle ways that even spirituality plays into this delusion, where even spirituality has become like a machine that needs, that is part of the imbalance, that spirituality needs you to be disempowered, to keep its story of self-importance alive, right? We have to see all of the ways that the play of the world needs you to be disempowered. And only when you come to the power of your own remembrance and meet without hierarchy, meet in love, does the power of your own true, alive intelligence actually truly ignite and come into service for the whole. Yes, there are guides and companions, but no guide or companion ever needs you, ever depends upon you, right? Part of our wiring, of our feeling of deficiency within the human condition, is that we need someone else. The same wiring plays out within relationships. You don't need anyone. You don't need anyone. You need to know yourself and to see through and delete the codes of conditioning that tell you that you need certain things, certain kinds of relationships, certain kinds of dynamics. Because when you come to the power of knowing yourself, you start to operate from a true intelligence where you can create healthy relational dynamics, where you can come into companionships that are enriching, enlivening, and support your deepening. No dynamic that needs you or asks you to compromise yourself is ever a reflection of your wholeness. It is a reflection of your belief in your own deficiency. We give our power away because we don't know the truth of the power of what we are. And we are moving from imbalance. Everything is conspiring for us to rebalance. Life itself is the way, the grace, but we have to be able to see it from a clear perspective, because in this time that sometimes gets called Kali Yuga, right? We're in a time of delusion. We're in a time of trickery, right? The trickster. We're in the time of the trickster, where everything holds the possibility of being a trick of the mind, of your mind. And the invitation is to see through the delusion of your own mind and the tricks that you are creating in the appearance of the world, and come to the power and freedom from the mind's tricks and delusion, where you see through all the stories and you stop wishing for the fantasy situation where you find some kind of story where you belong, and you find the belonging in your own heart. And then you start living in this revelation. You start living this revelation of the remembrance of perfect love. You start living the revelation of being the bliss that is just flowing within itself. This is what the longing is for. And the invitation is to remember. Remember this truth. Remember the truth of who you are, right? There are many ways of sharing happening that are partial truths. It is always for you to receive the grace of what enlivens you, but to be the power and authority, because true autonomy is the remembrance of the undivided clarity and honesty with yourself, being the power, being the knowing that knows, that there is nothing or no one that knows better. And yes, sometimes the mind will play that authority out, but that authority of the mind will be tripped up within your internal functioning. And alleluia for the humbling when it comes, right? But when we are longing for this truth, what we are longing for is autonomy. We're longing for a belonging to the one, the remembrance of being this power, being the glory, being the love that is. So as these words come, they are the message, they are the living message. But you decide, you receive, as you receive the resonance. Let's say every being will receive the resonance differently, will hear different words, will be enlivened in different ways. It is not being received by everyone the same, because it is not a message of information. It is a resonance. It is a message that is a frequency, and it is about receiving the frequency, recognizing the enlivenment and the recognition and remembrance of your own frequency, and then resting. So there's a sense that the knowing knows truth. This is where truth is empirical. It proves itself. It proves itself within your own functioning. Now, it can feel scary to be invited into such a depth of power. Now, what you can know is that support is here. Love is here. Care is here. Everything that acts as a bridge is here. But it is not to fear your own power, not to fear the power of the love that you are. To not fear yourself, to not fear your own wholeness. Right now, in this moment, in the stillness, in the silence, let us unravel those codes of limitation, the fear of our own wholeness, the learned belief in some kind of needs met structure that required dependency, that we learnt that love comes in return for some kind of dependency. Let us unravel that condition within the field right now. That love does not come in return for some kind of dependency. Love does not come in return as some kind of currency for you giving yourself in exchange for love. That is not how love operates. Love is open, love is free, love is kind, love is patient. Love is the glory of God. It is the openness, the divine wholeness, the purity of who you are. Love is not a currency. It is not a bargaining tool. And it is not a place where you have to compromise yourself in order to get love. That is not love. That is not love. So where there is a recognition in this moment of discordance patterning that has been playing, let us in the silence offer that discordance into the silence deeper. Let the silence be the power that shines and illuminates the discordant patterning, the patterns of misunderstanding, the patterns of dysfunction and corruption. Let these patterns fall away. Let there be a surfacing and transmutation of these patterns in the field. Releasing dynamics. that are based upon the belief in deficiency, releasing dynamics that are based upon a belief that love has to be earned, that love is given in return for your dependence. Releasing these patterns of limitation and allowing that flow of life, of true love, to enter these places that have believed in deficiency, allowing true love to enter the heart that has felt to be limited, personal, letting true love, light, flow in remembrance. The resonance of remembrance allows a sense of expansion of the sense of personal heart, deficient heart, broken heart, wounded heart, to open to the remembrance of infinite heart, powerful heart, heart of God, heart of love, true heart of perfection, of wholeness, a heart that is lacking nothing, a heart that sees itself in the glory of remembrance, of wholeness, a heart that is full, that is not holding back, that is not needing to play out dysfunction and malfunction within the physicality as a way of getting attention. A heart that is bursting with life, a heart that is pure and open and free. A heart that is natural in its openness and clarity. A heart that is not feeling sadness or rejection or abandonment. As these patterns come forward, they are surfacing where there are patterns of rejection, abandonment, sadness in the field. Where these are held as patterns of deficiency, these patterns are clearing now in the presence of love, in the presence of the light and wholeness that can flow in and move these stagnant flows, these beliefs in deficiency. As these patterns of limitation that are part of the program of the human condition are offering themselves to the silence, offering themselves to the light. The resonance of love, of purity, is transmuting and refining anything that is being held in a sense of limitation. That your heart is free, your heart is light. This heart of light is pure, perfect love. And this heart is you in the remembrance of the truth of who you are. No harm can come to you, and you can cause no harm. Holding patterns, that belief, a fear that harm can come if you let go of your story of deficiency. A belief that you can do harm if you really shine and rest in the fullness of the power of love. where there has been a receiving, a reflection of resonances that could not receive the fullness, so asked you to dim your light, asked you to act out limitation as a reflection of their limitation, innocently. But as we illuminate these places, as these patterns come forward that are being held as beliefs, so the patterns of limitation are held as beliefs and conditions that keep the structure of deficiency alive and keep us held in patterns that are driving from the story of limitation. But as they are coming into the light, they are offering themselves to the silence, to the field. They're offering themselves to the light, to the love. Because they can feel, these places can feel the remembrance. They can feel the spark of remembrance. They can feel the remembrance of a love that is being longed for, can feel the remembrance of an unlimited flow of freedom and wholeness. That is the power, the glory, the shining light. You do not need to give yourself away to anyone or anything in order to receive the remembrance of love that you are. To get love, you do not need to give yourself to any kind of dynamic that does not feel completely wholesome and aligned within. This is where you really realign with the remembrance of power. And this is where life is the grace that offers us this possibility within our relational dynamics, within the play of life. It's constantly offering us the possibility to realign with the power of the knowing inside the presence of being, realign with the remembrance of love, and to not say yes to any kind of dynamics or actions or play that doesn't feel wholesome and true. Because if it doesn't feel wholesome and true, and you step away from that truth, then you are stepping away from aligning with the power and presence of being yourself. There is a discernment that has to come in that life will offer you opportunities to discern and realign. And it doesn't really matter what happens, but everything is conspiring to keep inviting you to come to the presence of being, to come to the remembrance of the wholeness that you are, to give yourself to love is to give yourself to the love that you are, to give yourself to the remembrance of wholeness, to give yourself to the longing and the recognition of a felt sense of knowing that this is truth. This is truth. That you can feel the resonance of truth. And it is to, we could say, to trust yourself. Because to trust yourself is to start to come back to the remembrance of true intuitive knowing. The discernment happens in that many patterns of protection will try to fire up and keep you protected. And that is why companionships come in that hold us in the light of awareness and ask us to keep questioning. Is that protection? Is that truth? Do you feel completely free in that sense of truth within, in that alignment? Do you feel completely free and whole? Because if you don't feel completely free and whole, then you are likely in some kind of protection. And it's an opportunity to go deeper and to release what is trying to surface. This is the work that we are invited to do together here, is to allow this surfacing to happen so that protections can break free. And there is the most extraordinary grace in having the possibility to break free of protections and come to a depth of remembrance of the power that you are. There is a knowing that knows, but it is not an egocentric patterning. It does not bring you to a sense of a better me. It does not bring you to a sense of any kind of sense of elevation. It brings you to a humbling where there's no more sense of me and a sense of there just being love. But life is the means that humbles us and creates all of the right kinds of relationships and dynamics and companionships that will offer us the possibility to see through the places where we give power away to the belief in an external love and connection. And let's say in perfect timing, we are given the opportunities to see more clearly. We can feel like we have a perfect knowing, but don't ever rest in your perfect knowing. Don't ever rest in a sense of ownership of that knowing, because that knowing, let's say the parameters of that knowing constantly shift, and the humbling continues to deepen and deepen and open the possibility of realms of clarity, of seeing that are so far beyond the imaginings, that this freedom is freedom from the mind, utter freedom from the mind, because mind itself is protection. We are being invited into a freedom where we see who we are before the play of opposites, the play of karma, where we recognize that we have the possibility of actually completely cracking all of the codes of karmic holdings, that we're not bound by karmas, that we have the possibility of cracking the codes. Seeing through the holding patterns in every direction in order to recognize and remember that we are not bound in truth by anything, that there are no dynamics that bind us, because we don't need love and sustenance from an external source, that we are fully sustained within our own inner functioning. We even have the capacity for depths of healing that are like rejuvenations, where we don't have to rely upon the systems that are mental systems that are constantly trying to disempower and trap us into the belief that we are somehow diseased and dysfunctioning, right? We have to see through, or we could say we have the opportunity to see through all of the ways that the collective delusion will try to trick us into believing that we are somehow less than whole, that we are somehow broken, that we're not operating correctly, that we need more, that we're not successful, that the whole play of the world of appearance is a trick. The only thing that's true is the presence of being, is love, perfect love that wants nothing from you, needs nothing from you. We're constantly being invited into more relationships with dependence. Creating dependency, entangling ourselves into systems that are dependent upon you, entangling yourself in them. But when you come to this power, this recognition of being, and you start to see as the light of awareness, you see the depth of imbalance that is the collective, that is the world, that is your life. We have to say it the way it is. The life of a me is absolute delusion. It's shocking how delusional it is. It's shocking how deeply we are entangled. But we have the possibility to thread by thread untangle ourselves from the dependency, from following the crowd that is lost. This is why it is such a potent timing, and why it has never been more important to untangle yourself from these cycles of fear and delusion. It is to free yourself from the mind, the one collective mind, and being tangled into that mind and the systems and the ways that it plays that has you believe that this is reality, this is the way that it is, and that you have to conform and believe in those ways. That there are constantly more ways of seeing through how dependent the mind is upon its reflection, reflecting that I am right, I'm okay, I'm safe, because my reflection of my world feels safe. I'm creating everything. That what we are being invited into is a depth of extraction and a reclaiming, a remembrance of power that asks us to untangle from all of the ways that we are deluded, so that we come to the frequency of love, and that the life lived in many ways it looks exactly the same, but it's empty of power dynamics, it's empty of dependency, it's empty of fear, and it's empty of struggle, it's empty of misery, right? This is what we are being invited into, is the remembrance of a wholeness that is self-sustaining and whole, but it takes the most extraordinary amount of courage to follow the call of your heart. The only reason this meeting is happening is because the call of your heart and the longing in you to remember. We could even take it to a wider stretch and say that the longing of humanity to remember is creating this kind of meeting, is creating this. This message is coming forward as a response. It's what you want to hear. It's what your heart wants to hear. It may not be what your mind wants to hear. But this is the opportunity to receive the resonance of where there is recognition, enlivening, even if it brings forward frequencies of fear, because that's part of the purification. The part of this message is that it's supposed to stir you out of your sleepy slumber of misunderstanding, that you are divided, separate, powerless, deficient creature, into the remembrance of the true power of what you are before you believed everything that was reflected to you as a child, and you started to move as a young being that believed that you were deficient and lacking. What we are inviting here is that you see through and remember who you are before you believed that you were deficient and lacking in some way, that you remember the wholeness that you have always been underneath the play and the story of deficiency, that you have always been whole. So this is why these words, your heart wants to hear these words. Your soul, your being, all that you are wants to hear these words, because these are your words, the words. This is the message. This is not someone's message. This is not someone speaking to someone else. This is the message of this time, that you are calling forward in desperation because of the entanglement in the collective is so miserable. You are calling forward this message. You are calling forward something different, for something to change. But you have to be the change. You have to be the courageous one that shifts your allegiance from watching the news and believing that you are part of that story of misery. And you have to believe yourself, only in yourself, only in the frequency of the love that you are, and shift the attention from believing in lack and fear to believing in wholeness and love as all there is. Where this knowing knows is where you start. You're not expected to be perfect and exemplary to start with, but you are invited to know that you are perfection. And where you know and remember perfection, you are invited to align with the perfection and the love, the frequency of love, and to keep purifying and clarifying all of the places that feel dull and cloudy in your life. Allow there to be a great rebalancing so that you release the threads of feeling beholden to others, and you just behold the glory of God that is perfect love. There is no love without God. There is no God without love. It's the same. The love of God and God's love, it's the same. What God is not what religion has told you. God is not the great authority figure that is either pointing to you as a sinner and asking you to redeem yourself. God is not a figurehead that is telling you that you are deficient. That is the imbalance of power that all religions are rooted in, right? That's the delusion. That's the trick. That is not what God is. God is the all-encompassing whole. It is to turn to the all-encompassing whole by recognizing and remembering the spark of this love, of this remembrance that is your own heart, that no one can take that from you. No one has ever taken that from you. No matter how intense your story of wounding, abuse, rejection, betrayal, abandonment, hurt, suffering, stress, no matter how intense your human story may be, no one has ever taken your innocence. No one has ever taken your purity. No one could ever take your divinity from you. You have never, ever been diminished in the glorious light. And there is a spark inside you that knows this truth, that remembers this truth. And this is what we are awakening and remembering and enlivening, is the remembrance of a love that is perfect and whole, in order to remember that you are that love, and you do not need your delusional ways of bargaining yourself in the play of the world in order to get love, because you are love. And really your role is to release the dynamics of need, of needs being met, of compromise, of selling yourself in order to get love, making love be some kind of an exchange. In order to release all of those dynamics, you have to be the love. And the light of that love, the presence of that love, in which all of those dynamics can courageously release themselves. You do not need anything or anyone to love you, because you are love. And when you know yourself as love, the love that you are is so extraordinary that you love as love, and you are so loved as love. You feel so loved as love, because every being is a reflection of the love that you are, loving you, right? It doesn't get better than that. What your heart wants to hear is the truth. What your mind wants to hear is what makes it feel safe. What your heart wants is freedom, is the remembrance of love. What your mind wants is whatever next delusion will make it feel what it wants to feel. Whether that is in buying more things, getting more things, whether it's belonging to some kind of situation that makes you feel a certain fuzzy kind of way, whether it's within relationship dynamics, whatever it's in, whether it's in a job, whether it's in earning certain amounts of money, or feeling like you have financial security, that you own things, whatever is the way that that delusion is playing out. Let us just invite that those discordant patterns of limitation and conditioning that are the program of the human condition can surface, and that love can touch all of this discordant functioning and invite a flowing freedom from these codes that are held. That to give yourself to love does not mean to leave your life It means to leave the dysfunctional dynamics, to leave everything that holds you bound, and to illuminate what holds you bound, and to be the love, and to shine as that love. And so you don't withdraw love. You love more than you have ever loved as love. And that love starts with loving yourself enough to be the love that you are. Right? Yes. Yes. Just to hear the resounding yes in the heart that knows, even if it brings stirrings in the mind. This is good. Stirrings are purification, and purification are discordant patternings in the process of remembrance, right? Stirrings, purifications, refinements is simply the natural humbling out of holding patterns into the remembrance of the love and the light that is the truth that is longed for. So you are the openness that is openly receiving, and you can feel the resonance of truth, the resonance of what you are, can bring a feeling of feeling really enlivened, like the flames of your knowing are fanned in the light of the message. And yes, the stirrings can come as purifications happening. And it's just to allow it all in the big, wide open space of the infinite heart that can receive it all, transmute it all. There's nothing that you need to do or understand. The intelligence is moving it all naturally, wisely, reconfiguring, recalibrating. It is just to align with your yes, with the recognition, the resonance of remembrance. This is what is being invited. Everything takes as long as it takes, but it's in motion, it's in process. It is just to align and keep saying yes. And everything else, the great unfolding, is natural. It is to trust yourself so deeply, to allow the power to return to a sense of deep, holy presence of being, where there is no doubt about what you are, and your holding patterns of guilt and shame and deficiency cannot pull you away into division, into what is not healthy, into dependency. That in a way, the curing of all addictions happens when we just come to the presence of love. Addictions will fall away because addictions are just a way to be dependent upon something else and not yourself, right? The momentum within your own wholeness to be whole, to naturally heal and transmute, to naturally rejuvenate as much as the physiology is able. It's all possible. It's to remember that you are the power and intelligence that can shift everything. If you don't believe, you are broken. Now, of course, some patterns are going to be more stubborn and harder to shift. But where there is a willingness to actually truly stop, give whatever you are working upon, whatever's arising as like an edge or something that feels challenging, It's to give it to the silence. Here's an invitation. Here's an invitation that's coming forward. It is to illuminate. Maybe some of you already have some kind of system for this, but this is what is just being shown here right now, is to have a method for spotlighting, illuminating what feels like it's hard. Because it's really important in this unfolding and returning to remembering the power and intelligence that you are, that can shift everything, that can illuminate everything. Spotlighting, illuminating what feels hard can be an important part of the process. Sometimes we can speak about this as like asking for help, like being specific. It can help the process of learning, remembering how to focus upon an area that is trying to surface and recalibrate itself, to bring the light to an area, any area that has dysfunction, discordance, pain, imbalance that needs to be recalibrated. It's trying to recalibrate itself if it's presenting some kind of symptoms being physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, stress releasing, whatever it is, big or small. It's always to be the awareness that's illuminating, right? But in the remembrance, what is just being offered here, it sounds incredibly simple, is to actually write down, have a place that you write down exactly what is being worked on, what is being illuminated, so that you within your own function, you have an awareness. Okay, awareness is focusing upon this pain in my shoulder. It's focusing upon a feeling of just feeling really discordant and confused. Or it's focusing upon this situation in the relationship that I don't know how to deal with, right? That you kind of spotlight and you write it down. You write it down as a way of kind of illuminating it. Now, you might feel like, oh, I don't need to do that. And that's totally fine. You might be fine-tuned enough in the intelligence that you can really remember that focus. But as a way of supporting that, it sounds simple, but it's very powerful that you write it down. It just supports this focus, being very specific. It's always within the mechanistic functioning. It's always about illuminating what feels to be discordant and kind of giving it to the silence. This is how the intelligence works. It's the moment of surrender. So it can feel like offering what feels discordant to the silence. And what that feels like within your functioning is that you illuminate, you write it down. Maybe instead of writing it down, you just speak it out loud, whatever feels true for you, but having a way of spotlighting and then returning to the silence is the way that you give it to the silence, is you return to the silence, you drop right in to the frequency of silence, of love, of the being. You drop right into the deepest possible frequency. You can ask for help here, but you don't ask for an outcome. You can't ask for an outcome. You just ask openly. So this is what happens in the field, is when you offer something into the field, something comes back. And what comes back is either an amplification of something beautiful, right? We'll speak more about that in just a moment. Or what comes back is like an antidote, right? When we really give it to the silence, when we really offer it, right? So this is what we're always inviting, but we're just in this moment speaking about it in a really fine amount of detail, that we offer this to the silence. We can also use this as a way of amplifying the love, right? Where you feel the fine frequency, you can offer that fine frequency. Feel it. How do you offer it? How does that happen? You just feel it. You drink it in, right? We sometimes speak about you really drink it in. You feel all of the aliveness of it, and then you let it go. You let it go. And it will come back somehow amplified. It amplifies, right? Whenever we offer something into the silence, whenever we offer something, like in a very specific way, it will purify. It's kind of the intelligent code within the intelligence of consciousness of how it purifies and refines itself. So sometimes we might speak about it, of be aware of it, illuminate it, let the light shine upon it. This is what we are speaking of. But in this moment, we're just fine-tuning, particularly because we are in our morning sitting and we're really amplifying that frequency of love, of remembrance. And that what's happening in that is that as we sit, we feel the alive frequency, we're drinking it in, and we're deepening in, and it just keeps amplifying. And the amplification encourages more purification, and it offers this purification to all beings, right? It's an offering to all because it is one wholeness, one whole functioning. So sometimes the mind can say, oh, well, how? And I don't know how, and I'm trying so hard. And of course, it's not ever a how question that can be answered in a way that the mind will feel that it has an instruction. But perhaps we can use this guidance, this message, as a way of bridging the need to kind of understand with the recognition of the natural intelligence. And how we would let that bridging happen is by taking in what's being offered, and then you feel into what feels true. Don't just do what is being shared with you. That's not what's happening. It's not an instruction. It's not a command, like, oh, now I need to do that. Feel into it. What feels true? What aligns? Where you feel alignment, test it out. Where you don't feel alignment, just let it go. It doesn't matter. It's all about you being the power and glory of the being. The true you is not the mind and the person. The true you is the power, the glory, and the resonant frequency of love that is pure and whole.